Benvenuto all'ascolto di The Audio Journey, la newsletter dedicata all'industria del digital audio. Sono Mirko Lagonegro, founder e CEO di MD Audio Strategy, e in questa puntata ho il piacere di intervistare Steve Goldstein e parlare con lui di Branded Podcast. Steve è il fondatore e CEO di Amplifi Media, una società che fornisce servizi di consulenza nell'ambito proprio del digital audio e del podcasting. È professore contratto alla New York University ed è uno speaker riconosciuto davvero a livello internazionale quando si parla di queste tematiche. Pochi giorni fa è stato infatti keynote speaker alla terza edizione di Give Your Brand a Voice, l'evento organizzato dall'Ospite Podcast Committee. Hi Steve, nice to talk with you again.
Grazie, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Steve, we are used starting our conversation describing the Italian podcast market scene, and according to the latest OBE BVA Doxa survey, the audience has grown further, reaching around 50 million people on a monthly basis, and 6 of them listen to at least one podcast daily or weekly. At the same time, unfortunately, on a total Italian digital media market of almost 5 billion euro, billion with the B, the revenue of branded podcast plus podcast advertising is around 10 million with the M. To me, but not just to me, it seems that here brands and agencies consider more important working on the lower funnel than on the upper one. And I think there are still too many brands and agencies who prefer to be the interruption instead of being the content, looking for views or clicks instead of generating attention and interest. What's your opinion about it?
So I think a couple of things. First of all, brands are relatively new to podcasting, as podcasting is relatively new. I mean, legacy media, we're talking television, we're talking radio, newspaper, whatever. Those are all things that they know how to do. Podcasting 10 years ago in the United States was a mere $250 million. That was it. Nothing much. And now it's closing in on $2 billion. And the only reason that it has moved now closer to that $2 billion mark is because advertisers, big advertisers, are experimenting. But as we both know, the measurement is still clunky, getting way better, and the tools keep changing, and it's exciting. But they are used to buying digital and getting those feedback loops, which are way more sophisticated than they're getting in podcasting. So that's step one. They're just learning the medium. Second, when we come to them and we say, "Hey, you can have a podcast that's about you," that is an opportunity for some and daunting for others. But I don't think that there's one way that has to go. I think there's multiple ways that can be constructed. And they need to see that there are opportunities besides taking 20 minutes and talking about their own orange juice, which I'm not sure people are going to listen to. They need to solve a problem. They need to connect with an audience. And they could also be the master sponsor of a podcast that has nothing to do with them, but it is aligned with their mission.
I see. Steve, let's talk about quality of a branded podcast. Talking to a brand or an agency, it happens sometimes that they consider good quality a podcast in which the brand's name is explicit and repeated many times, a sort of celebration, self-celebration, let's say, instead of producing contents relevant for audience they can exploit. Have you ever faced this situation?
So when have I not? We co-produce one of the biggest branded podcasts in the U.S. I cannot mention who it is. I can tell you that it is in the food category, but that's all I can say. But the key word is food. The people who listen to the podcast are interested in food and cooking and strategies and what works, what ingredients make sense. They are interested in their own kitchen. And so that show is not about mentioning the name of the client. The show is about solving problems for people who are curious about food. And food is a wonderful category, as you could well imagine. So that kind of imagination, I think, needs to be brought to other clients. Now, I also have a client that's an insurance company, okay? And they have a very specific clientele, chiropractors. They are the largest insurance provider to chiropractors in the United States. They have almost 50,000 clients. All they want to do is talk to those clients. They don't even need to go beyond that. They are trying to establish a more firm relationship with the chiropractors. Totally different strategy, totally different mission, but their mission clearly is connecting with those clients.
Steve, what's the situation of the podcast industry all over the world, especially in terms of brand adoption?
So I don't have stats on that. You can follow companies like Magellan, which do a really good job, sounds profitable, tracks that sort of thing. But there's no question that we are moving in that. If you're looking at it on a linear scale, we're moving north pretty rapidly, and that is because the demography of podcast is so attractive. I mean, as I showed to the group when we did our keynote in the U.S., it's 34 years old. That's 30 years below every other major media. So that's why they want in. They need to talk to the next generation or generations. And this is where they're going to find them. And as I say often, again, using US, but I'm going to guess it's going to work out pretty similarly in Italy and everywhere else, that the new talk radio is podcasting for the younger generations. And so that's why I think the brands need to be paying attention in jumping in this space so that they have a voice to communicate to these people who are in their days of buying homes and apartments and learning how to do products and purchasing new cars. I mean, this is the only medium that is really clearly targeted at that group.
Steve, a couple of weeks ago, I was in London attending to the Podcast Festival 2024. And during a panel, there has been a sort of provocative question like switch from CPM, cost per mille, cost per thousand, to CPM as cost per minute, as highlight the fact that probably could be better for the industry to focus, to let brands and agencies focus on the fact that we provide them roughly 15, 20, 30 minutes of powerful engagement. So it's not a matter of just quantity in terms of reach, but more a matter of quality. How deep the connection between brands and listeners a branded podcast can provide. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think they're essentially different things. Let me answer this one a little bit differently because I was schooled by a podcaster a couple of years ago who is in what's called the HVAC business. They sell those big air conditioning systems that sit on the top of buildings. And he loves podcasting. And so he started a podcast, this guy who runs an HVAC company. He didn't know anything about podcasting. He just kind of, the magic of it attracted him. He started producing this podcast geared toward HVAC purchasers. In other words, the engineers that install these systems, purchase and install the systems. And he has an audience of several thousand, 2,000, 3,000. I don't remember the number. And so I said, well, how do you make money? How do you charge? And he said, oh, that's the fascinating part. He said, you can't put a CPM on the audience that I deliver. I am delivering the people that Train and Carrier and all of these big companies want to talk to. And so they pay me a premium. We are way past CPM. We're way past cost per minute. We're at me delivering the audience that might have gone to a magazine 20 years ago on the topic, but I'm reaching them and I'm reaching them on a weekly basis. And so these big advertisers pay up for the opportunity to be in this podcast. So how much do I love that idea versus trying to deal with CPMs, which I think are going to be inefficient for most of these brands? The numbers probably aren't going to be that great, and that's a problem for the creators. But if you're delivering the right audience, if you're a bank and you are speaking to let's say, people buying homes, and you are able to close business because of that, what is the value of that? And I hope it's not CPM or cost per minute. I hope it's something else. And it's hard to be precise about that, but we all know what conversion is.
From your perspective, what could be the best way to facilitate this paradigm shift, if there's any?
Well, I think it's a process. I think that the podcasts that will succeed, or any media that will succeed, are the ones that solve problems for the audience, solve problems for the client. I think the notion that every brand needs a podcast I don't subscribe to that at all. I said that in my keynote. I don't think this is the right thing for everybody, but I think it's a fantastic thing for some. And so some of them are going to have to experiment, and some of them have been burned. Some of them have tried podcasting, have not done it properly. They put two people behind a mic and they held a conversation and it didn't attract an audience. And so they say, well, podcasting doesn't work. So I think it's important to illustrate and demonstrate cases in which podcasting does work. And I'll give you another example that came to me, and it's not the same, but it is close. Amazon has a podcast, and it's targeted at small businesses. Well, Amazon has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of small businesses, but they don't know how to maximize and use Amazon properly. And so they created a podcast. It's not a commercial podcast. They are paid a fee. They're paying a fee to a company to create it, not unlike what you do. And this company does the research, works with Amazon closely, and creates this product on, I believe it's a bi-weekly basis. And it runs about 20, 25 minutes where they focus on an angle, how to improve your whatever it is with Amazon. I so love that model because it breaks everything that we're used to and frankly breaks what they're used to. I think that's something that a lot of brands should explore, how to help clients, how to attract clients.
Steve, we both come from radio. How do you see evolving this media, our legacy media?
I think there is a parochial sort of notion in radio that they are okay, and they are not okay. They are losing audience. And I think the best model for radio to follow is what's happened on the video side. Everything is moving to on demand. People don't watch a show on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. They watch a show whenever they want to. And so that's migrated to streaming platforms, their own apps, other apps. I mean, they have had to innovate and change to stay relevant. And radio has to do the same. Sure, they own the car, but that number is declining rapidly as connectivity increases, meaning CarPlay and Android Auto and other tools that make it easier to listen in the car. What happens when the car is no longer the choice for radio? And that appears to be happening everywhere at different arcs, at different speeds. The thing that blows me away most about that, Mirko, is that it's audio. They do know how to make audio. It's not exactly the same making a podcast as making a broadcast, for sure, but it is in their wheelhouse of understanding if they choose to be more curious and more experimental. In the U.S., a lot of the radio companies are in bankruptcy or close to bankruptcy, so they don't have those R&D departments right now where they could play around with stuff. But boy, they desperately need it.
Steve, thank you so much for joining the audio journey.
Thank you for having me, and it was very enjoyable. Thanks.
Se non l'hai già fatto, iscriviti alla nostra pagina e alla nostra newsletter cercandoci su LinkedIn. Un saluto da Mirko Lagoneca.